There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Good morning. Today is September 28th, 2020. We are still in the midst of COVID, and so this is a Zoom presentation of Community Forum. And we welcome today Carol Doherty, who is a candidate in the 6th precinct of Easton and all of Taunton, and also Kyla Bennett, Dr. Bennett, who is an environmental lawyer and has her doctorate in biology. And Kyla is closely connected with the campaign and the issues which are important for Carol. So Carol, let's begin. Give us a little bit of your background and tell us, your education, your background, whatever you want to say about yourself.
Surely. First and foremost, good morning, Priscilla. Thank you very much for providing the opportunity for me to speak to the residents of Easton, particularly the 6th precinct, and of course, Taunton. So representing as a candidate for re-election in the 3rd Bristol District is a very exciting prospect to me. The special election was on June 2nd with only a short period of time in the legislature. I'm looking forward to being re-elected to have my own 2-year term so that I can dig into the issues that are important to the folks in the 3rd Bristol. I am an educator by career, just very briefly, a classroom teacher, elementary school guidance counselor, president of the Massachusetts Teachers Association for 2 terms. Some while ago, I have spent the bulk of my career too is spent 17 years in education and then 18 years in the School of Education at Northeastern University. My work was to create and continue to move forward a construct for professional development for teachers at that time, and truly enjoyed that work. When the work was finished, as a transition from leadership of education-focused folks in the School of Education changed. They determined that they didn't really think that professional development for teachers was the key issue at the time, which made me chuckle as we think going forward about PD for teachers. So I decided then to run for the Taunton School Committee and have done for 5 terms and have been very much enjoying that opportunity to represent families and children in the community. It's really given me a chance to get to look at community issues through the lens of public education, meeting children, meeting families, and helping to support their wants and needs. And I still hold that seat at the moment. So I decided to run for the state representative seat when the seat became vacant because the person who held the seat went on to become mayor of the city of Taunton. And so here I am running for re-election for my own 2-year term, as I said earlier. So thank you.
Great. So tell us, what are some of the most important issues that you see facing your district? And Kyla, please feel free to jump in anytime.
Well, I have to say, when I started this journey as a candidate for state representative, my centerpiece of my campaign was to be working families, doing everything that I could as a legislator to support the wants and needs of working families in the district. Affordable housing, quality education, good neighborhoods, accessible and affordable health care, those kinds of things that really help to create a quality of life for families in the communities. And we were quickly blindsided by COVID-19. So the quest for affordable housing became prevention of eviction and foreclosures for people in the district. The quest for fully funding public education became the joy of having the governor say that he was willing to provide level funding from last year's funding to support public schools with a little bit of wiggle room for inflation. The new Student Opportunity Act was a very exciting agreement among the legislators several months ago, and we have all been very excited to have the Student Opportunity Act before us, and we have quickly put that on the back burner. So those kinds of issues remain important, but they have the overlay of COVID-19, saving people, helping people to provide jobs, helping businesses to continue in the best way that they can during this very difficult pandemic for all of us.
Carol, since you brought up COVID-19, I have a question about how do you think Governor Baker has handled the COVID-19 response, and what are your feelings about the way schools are addressing the reopenings and the safety of the students and the teachers?
Two questions that come up relatively frequently. As a member of the school committee, obviously the reopening plans are really critical and important. I have been a part of reopening, obviously here in Taunton. It has been just a challenge for school districts across the Commonwealth, across the country, to figure out how to get kiddos back into school, but by the same token, helping to support the health and well-being and the safety of children, their families, and of course the staff that come into the schools as well. The Department of Education and the governor had given leave early on to districts to move in a direction that they thought most important to their particular district, presenting 3 plans, as you probably know, fully in school, remote learning, and hybrid learning. Here in Taunton, and as I understand in Easton, we have chosen kind of a quasi-remote learning, some youngsters in school. So the children that are in school are children who are most at risk, special needs children, English language learners, foster children, and homeless children will be coming into school shortly. Kindergartners are in a remote learning mode. Children in the kindergarten age level who are at risk will come into school, and the same thing. So that's going on across the district. We have a plan both in Easton and Taunton, and we feel very keenly that we need to stay with that plan. And as you know, there's a broad spectrum of opinion about what ought to happen. In our district, the rate of the virus has taken a dip so that we're kind of in the safe level, the green area, the gray area. And so that kind of is a signal for being more aggressive, getting more children into school. But there is a concern that doing that we'll see an uptick in the virus. We've already had 3 or 4 cases identified in Taunton alone of the virus, and there's a domino effect. You have somebody identified, they have to be out, people have to be contact traced, they have to be out while they're incubating, and it goes on like that. So it is very difficult, extraordinarily complex, and I have to take my hat off to superintendents in both Easton and Taunton, to their leadership team, and to the school staff, to the unions, of working together to try to get a construct that's going to be most beneficial to the learning curve of our children and the social emotional needs of our children as well. So to the question of Governor Baker, I wouldn't want to be in his substantial shoes under any circumstance. I have watched almost all of the press conferences that he holds daily. He manages to stay focused. He takes advice from Secretary Sutters, from the CDC, and from others about the direction that he should go in. I think that the phase-in plan that was put forward a few months ago was a good phase-in plan. Terrible impact on businesses. Businesses are anxious to get going, and I think to a large measure they have managed to make accommodations in their work, in their businesses, particularly restaurants, that allow them to get back into the business of serving the public. So We're in phase 3, part B, going on to phase 4. The governor did loosen his recommendation to to adhere strictly to the reopening of school. He's asked for us to, all of us, to look more carefully at where we are in terms of that reopening and think forward in a short period of time, bringing more kiddos into school. So it's fluid, as the Commissioner of Education has said, it's a fluid situation, and we know that it changes from day to day. So we look carefully at those constructs and follow the unique needs of the district and the advice of those people who are in a place where they can give us the best scientific analysis of how we should proceed forward.
So talking about looking forward, which I think is very important, a lot of scientists are saying we are in the age of pandemics, that we've reached a tipping point in our environment and globalization, that this is the beginning of something. I mean, it's not as if this is going to go away and we're never going to have another pandemic again. So if we are going to truly be looking forward to probably more pandemics in our lifetimes, how is the state dealing with these new schools that are being built? I know here in Easton, we have a new elementary school, which is great. We got a nice grant from the state to help build it. We're combining our 3 elementary schools, but do we have the flexibility? It doesn't seem to me that we have the flexibility to tweak those plans to ensure that any new school that we build would be better able to resist a future pandemic. For example, better ventilation systems, or more windows for the classrooms, no inside. What do you think about looking into the future and really understanding and that this is where we are, this is the new normal, and that we have to address this?
And I think, Kyla, I like the new normal, because I have said right from the beginning, particularly around schooling, that we must take the lessons that we learn from this experience and embed them into our thinking going forward, whether that is strategies and techniques for teaching and learning, or, as you suggest, preparing buildings or building new buildings that accommodate what we anticipate or what we were told by the scientists as could be a pandemic future. We have also just opened a brand new school. The design of that building, of course, was on the table and approved by the MSBA long before we anticipated the pandemic. We talked about new heating systems, the exchange of internal and external air, so that the buildings are self-cooled and heated using the flow of air through the building. I wish I could be technical about the name of what that is, but and windows that open. So wanting there to be a free flow of air, even without knowledge of the importance of that in this pandemic era. I think of our high school that was built some 20 or 30 years ago, and wasn't the community happy when we had a high school that was hermetically sealed and the windows don't open? So now, in retrospect, we have hired experts to come in and measure the airflow and make recommendations for adjustment, particularly in that building for the airflow. Our custodians have looked around to make sure the windows open, and of course the social distancing. And one wonders if the size of the classrooms that the Mass School Building Authority is recommending will change going forward for newer buildings that will accommodate greater distances if we have that traditional one desk behind the other seating for our students. So I do think that we need to take the lessons that are learned in this respect and use them going forward. So who would have ever thought that we would be in this situation? It's just...
I think all the scientists knew. Actually,
well
we've been warning everybody for a long time now, but yeah, I understand it was, a lot of people didn't expect this. So setting aside COVID though, what do you think are the most important issues facing, and setting aside all the sequelae of COVID, the businesses being closed and possible evictions, what are the most important issues facing your district?
Well, I am a freshman legislator, as I said in my opening remarks, only in the legislature now for about 3 months. But it, as I understand it, and a lot happened before I arrived. A lot of things were enacted in the House transportation bill, for example, that's awaiting a conference committee report. But there were a number of very important pieces of legislation that came before me, not before me in time, but in front of me for my consideration along with everyone else. And those pieces of legislation are currently in conference committee. So I think of the police reform legislation, climate change, housing choices, economic development. The transportation bill is still in conference committee. And for our listeners who may not be familiar, the House and the Senate get together after each branch enacts a piece of legislation for that branch, and they decide which aspects of the two bills are most appropriate to act finally on. And that's not even to mention the healthcare bill and the budget. The state revenue projections for this current period of time suggests a shortfall of anywhere from $5 to $6 billion in revenue. So one just has to imagine what that means. Clearly, we continue to be concerned about providing resources to communities to help to support folks who are just caught in, are the most affected by COVID-19. So there has to be resources. The safety nets that exist in the state budget, in my opinion, need to be preserved because they affect the people who are most affected by COVID-19. And so those safety net programs need to be funded, need to be supported. I think about we got good news actually by the House Ways and Means that the revenue shortfall isn't as big as they thought it would be. So it's less impactful, but $5 to $6 billion is huge. So we have to be very careful about what we're thinking about in terms of the budget. There isn't even an indication yet when it is that we are going to deal with enacting a budget for fiscal 21. The governor has previously, up until the end of October, asked us to support his recommendation for a 12-month budget. So we have done that. Clearly, the legislature is still in session, but in informal session. But we have not yet had a call to deal with any of these. And as I understand it, the conference committees are not yet ready to put forward legislation in any one of those aspects. So I think that in the short term, continuing to provide resources to support folks who are most greatly impacted by COVID-19 and funding public education, fully funded. I love to say fully funded because it's so clearly important. I think education is the cornerstone of our society. It is the centerpiece from which everything emanates going forward in the future, and is clearly important. So those two issues, COVID-19 and education, are really at the top of my list. Enacting a budget that's fair and continues to support the people in the district based on their wants and needs, and beginning to address financially those things that we need to address, like climate change and transportation and so forth.
So climate change is one of my favorite topics and one of my most important, I think one of the most important things that we need to deal with going forward. And I'm wondering what you think about, COVID-19 taught us that working from home is a possibility for a lot of people, which can help cut down on greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, for example. And I'm wondering whether you think that should be something that should be available to those that can take advantage of it. And if not, what other ways can municipalities like Easton and Taunton prepare themselves for the inevitable changes that are going to come with climate change?
Well, this climate change bill, as I understand it, is of historic proportions for the Commonwealth, perhaps putting us once again, as we sometimes or often do, in a leadership role nationally in terms of addressing some of the more critical issues that, as you point out, Kyla, affect the population of our folks and the third Bristol. The 2050 roadmap, as it's called, promises to reduce carbon emissions to 0 by 2050, which is certainly a lofty goal and requires creating partnerships and certainly intention on the part of all of us from what it is that we can do in our own personal lives and what the Commonwealth needs to do. So the transportation issue alone, I mean, we've seen more people working from home, so we're told, has created fewer carbon emissions because there's less traveling that has been done. And that may be, as we talk about learning lessons from our experiences in this pandemic, that may be a place where businesses, corporations are thinking nothing bad has happened to them in terms of the ability of people to continue to work and move their agenda forward. Why not continue to do that if that's possible? I was just talking to my son-in-law yesterday. He works in Boston. They live in Hingham. And he has been working home 4 days a week, goes in for a day a week just to have that human connection with the people that he works with as they come in and out of that workplace. So that aspect is really, really important. Things like wind energy is in that bill. In talking with President Douglas at Bristol Community College, they have created and are about to launch an institute on wind energy, where they will be training students about wind energy, to participate in generating wind energy, to getting jobs in that industry, as it's seen as quite a large aspect of jobs that will be created through the climate change bill. So all of this is it's very complex. It's extraordinarily long term, and we have to start. We need the conference committee to come forward, make some recommendations to enact that bill, and begin to move down that road toward 2050 and the zero carbon emissions. Just really, really critical. I just started reading a book by a fellow named Larson. I'm forgetting his last name. It's one of his first name. It's one of those old books, one of his first writings, and it is about the hurricane that wiped out Galveston, Texas, that many years ago. So it was in 1900, actually. And we are continuing to see an uptick in all kinds of weather changes, as you well know, tornadoes and hurricanes and tsunamis and fires and things that are devastating our communities from one coast to the next. And no doubt in my mind, as a result of the shifting climate in our world. And if we don't address it now, when will we address it?
So tell me, Carol, what do you think, what is your message to residents in Easton and Taunton in terms of why you should be elected their representative?
Well, first and foremost, I have had a lot of experience in representing the people, at the very least, in the city of Taunton through my work on the school board. I'm also very much connected in a service capacity to my community as well. So I serve on the board of directors, for example, of our Head Start program here in Taunton. It gives me additional insight in terms of childcare, for example, working with marginalized communities, helping to support the wants and needs of families who are less able than some other families who are economically deprived. So I have that perspective. I'm a member of the Elks and a member of the Kiwanis. And so all of that is not just being a member of, but being an active partner in those organizations, serving in various capacities on committees and in leadership roles over the years in those organizations. So I've gotten to know a lot of people. I have been very active in providing service to my community. And I think that those years of experience serve a person like me who wants to continue to be a state legislator, serves me well, because it gives me additional insight into what people are thinking, knowing who people are and what it is that they need. And I have begun, because I'm newly arrived to the 6th precinct in Easton, had begun some time ago to learn more about Easton, I've been invited to the Purple Heart ceremony and the 9/11 ceremony, the launching of the new sewer line, which was enjoyable. We got a tour of the pumping station there. And so it's given me an opportunity to meet the select board, for example, meet the town administrator and others in leadership roles in Easton, and to talk with them about the wants and needs of the people in Easton to advance my own understanding in a better way. And of course, I've been campaigning door to door in Easton as well. So it's a growing body of people that I know, people that I can talk with, and people that I will represent.
So what are the major differences between you and your opponent then?
Well, what I've just said in terms of my longevity in community active work. I have lived in this community since 1965. My opponent is a new arrival to the city of Taunton, 4 or 5 years. It's just not clear to me. I have had, again, much more experience in working in the community and being part of the community, which really divides us. So I think that that's really important now, especially during these times. And even in my short term in the legislature to this point, I have begun to develop relationships with other legislators, clearly forming partnerships around work that we collectively want to get done on behalf of our districts and the Commonwealth is really important. It counts for a lot to be a voice that is recognized and respected among the legislators. That's how you get the work done. And a voice that's recognized and respected in my community and growing in Easton as well.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Carol Doherty, for being our guest today. And we appreciate everything you said. And it's marvelously informational, but also you're very engaging. You're very astute in terms of what you see as the future needs of both of our communities, Taunton and Easton. And we wish you well. And thank you again for being our guest today on Community Forum.
Thank you so much, Priscilla. Much appreciated, Kyla, as well. Thank you.
Okay, and this is Priscilla Almquist Olsen concluding this very interesting and informative interview with Carol Doherty, who is Easton's sixth precinct candidate for the state legislature. And so until next time, be well, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.